Okay, so a recent global study by MIT Technology Review Insights, and I think it was produced in association, or well, the sponsor was Telstra. It reveals, I think the headline was that everyone seems to want to deploy AI, but a lot of people have maybe understood in looking at it that they can't actually support what they want to do. Yeah, how has that situation arisen, or what's going on? I suppose is the starting point.
Well, yes, Phil, the headline was actually differentiating the disruptors from the disrupted. So this study you mentioned is based on a survey we conducted in November and December last year. And we also interviewed a panel of AI experts for this report. And basically, it's really quite simple. What we wanted to look at was to examine the technological and business needs for effective implementation of generative AI. So we polled 300 executives in the US, Europe, and Asia Pacific. The majority of them are C-suite executives, and as well as people who were managing IT, data, and data engineering related functions. Now, the top line finding of this report was that 78% of respondents see this technology as a competitive opportunity rather than a threat. And at the same time, about the same percentage, to be exact, would be 76%, say their companies have used the technology in one way or another. And in addition, about 7 in 10 say they are finding ways to benefit from the technology, and it's the single leading priority of at least one corporate function of their company. But on the other hand, less than 1/3 of the respondents ranked their IT assets and capabilities at their companies as highly conducive for this rapid and effective adoption of generative AI. Now, an expert in Australia that we spoke to tells us that there is often a misconception about how easy it is to run mature enterprise-ready generative AI tools. Now, the large language model is almost the smallest part, she says, and they often find that they need to improve the data quality, privacy measures, AI skilling, and implement safe and responsible AI governance. So overall, the finding of this report is that many businesses that are aiming to disrupt the industries with this new technology could be underestimating the requirements for effective deployment of generative AI. Phil?
Okay, and in terms of perhaps I won't say worrying, but to sort of back up that, I think you found out as well that those who have actually worked with AI, those so for those that haven't are maybe optimistic, but those who actually have got to grips with AI are the least confident in terms of believing or trusting that their IT infrastructure is ready to deliver what they want. Is that fair to say?
That's a great observation that you picked up. And we asked our respondents to rank a range of their company's IT related capabilities or assets, if you may, that are necessary for this rapid adoption of generative AI. And just overall, generally, few respondents said that their company's assets are highly conducive. And you can see this, in figure 4 on page 16 of our report. You see that less than 30% of these respondents ticked highly conducive for this question. And, in almost every case, those who have implemented generative AI widely are more likely, we found, to rate their IT more harshly. And among early adopters, 65% of them reported that their available hardware was not at all or modestly conducive to rapid adoption of generative AI. So, and on the other hand, for non-early adopters, the figure was lower at about 50%. So among early adopters as well, about 5 out of 10 said their data volume, data accuracy, and data storage are at best modestly conducive. So these are the necessary assets, that these companies need to develop and run the AI that, they're hoping to benefit from.
Okay, so we've got a situation where there's something of a potential AI bottleneck, and while people are sort of optimistic at one level that they going to use AI to disrupt their markets, etc., there's a significant danger that they will actually be disrupted themselves as they get to grips with AI. Is that a fair summary of the situation?
Well, let me backtrack a little. You know, what we are finding based on this survey is that 78% of them see generative AI as a competitive opportunity, as I mentioned earlier. But you know, our other survey data suggests that this response reflects the respondents' hopes or aims to be, so to speak, on the side of the disruptors. And why do we say that? Because we found that 65% of the respondents said that their organizations are actively considering new and innovative ways to use generative AI to so-called unlock hidden opportunities from their data. So with this, we infer that a lot of 65% of them hope to be disruptors. But on the other hand, organizations have a substantial agenda to get through. As I had mentioned earlier, there are companies need to address their IT deficiencies or perceived deficiencies. Those few respondents are looking at their company's IT assets as highly conducive for effective and rapid deployment of generative AI. And on top of all that, you also need to think about the non-IT factors as well. So this implies that corporate leaders who plan to disrupt, their competition using the new technology may actually find themselves stumbling or on a host of challenges that, they might have underestimated.
Okay, so it looks like people need to build out end-to-end capability to avoid AI problems, and I'm wondering, perhaps David, in terms of what you're seeing, your customers asking you, etc., around that, and also I guess so when you got involved in the report, what were you wanting to understand and discover, I suppose, about the situation?
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I mean, in terms of the second part of that question, AI is really at this kind of the top of the hype curve at the moment. So it's a topic that's hot on everyone's mind. Everyone's been experimenting with tools like ChatGPT and so on. So I think in terms of it being topical, that was kind of using that to sort of drive some awareness around this topic. But in terms of like what we were keen to get out of it as a IT service, as an infrastructure provider, we really wanted to understand the nuances of how organizations were perceiving it, opportunity versus threat, and what they saw as a kind of the limitations. And so it's been very kind of enlightening and very interesting to see those results. I'm personally quite pleased that there's a level of optimism around it, that most people are seeing it as an opportunity. But they also are aware of the complexities involved in really making it happen. So we touched on a few of those there in terms of AI needs large amounts of data. So data volume is super important. It also has got an incredible power for creation, but it's also got an incredible power for potential destruction or potential kind of propagation of untruths or bias. So you've got to be very careful about the quality of the data as well. That large data set means storage becomes a factor, and moving that storage, moving that data around in terms of kind of the networking side of things also becomes super critical. And where you're putting it is another factor. The cloud providers have got incredible tool sets now. They're all investing heavily in this area with some amazing potential. But then you've got to think about the economics of that. Moving large data sets in and out of public cloud becomes quite expensive. And then, there's the risk aspect of that if you've got all of your intellectual property set in someone else's infrastructure. So it's a complex area. I think whilst the infrastructure is the part that we will help with people with, I think it was touched on in the earlier comments was really that the processes around that are also super, super important. The ethics and the overall kind of way in which it's adopted across the business. And that's another area that we're discovering as we're going through our own internal AI journey, but we've got specialists within our organization who can also advise customers on that.
And I'm wondering, maybe both of you in turn could, because I was slightly surprised the survey seems to, or study so it suggests that uh, the bit that isn't surprising is they think that AI will disrupt their industry sector. I guess that's fairly obvious, but I'm intrigued that the vast majority seem to embrace this disruption as they see it as an opportunity, not a threat. Just thoughts as to, I mean, were you surprised that the people were so positive about the AI opportunity or not?
Well, I wasn't surprised. I think I wasn't surprised that there's an opportunity for sure. I mean, if I look around our business, you know, like any other businesses, there's areas of inefficiency. There's areas in which, you know, straightforward, repetitive tasks can be automated in a more intelligent way. But I think, you know, looking beyond that kind of more transactional things in terms of, you know, summarizing information, making it clearer, that's all very time consuming, so it can unlock a lot of productivity. So that, I mean, that's great. But what excites me is the potential for innovation that it unlocks. And you know, a couple of examples of that would be how it can be used to sort of tackle the sustainability issues around carbon. So you can do a lot of carbon modeling. You can use it to unlock insights into the way that your scope 3 emissions are being calculated and the true impact of the environment. You can use it to create carbon digital twins of different scenarios, and so run multiple different options without actually having to physically build anything. So I think when we get to these sorts of use cases, you know, the potential is really sort of off the scale. So yeah, I'm not at all surprised that there's excitement around it. Kwee Chuan, I don't know what you think.
Yeah, definitely. You know, not surprised at all. And in fact, you know, also from certain industries, some executives are more likely to anticipate change. For example, you know, in our survey, we found specifically in the media and communications industry, 87% of respondents say, you know, they will generative AI will bring disruption. And you know, one of the interesting comments that we heard from our experts is from the MIT Sloan School's of Center for Digital Business. He said that generative AI is going to increasingly, quote unquote, gobble up any business involved in giving advice, technical, business, and financial. So there's really a lot, you know, that we still are not seeing in the space.
Okay, and in terms of, I mean, I guess this is no different from other hype cycles, and a lot of people can maybe get the impression because it's been talked about so much that everyone's already doing it. But again, I think the study actually said although there's a lot of excitement around AI, not many organisations have actually implemented much AI. They're maybe just playing. So yeah, just if you can explain, you know, the difference between the hype and the reality, if that's all right.
Maybe Kwee Chuan, do you want to go first
Sure.
from the survey, and then I can talk to how Telstra is doing it internally and give you kind of an insight into how a large corporate like us is adopting it.
Sure, sure. So, you know, our survey found that only 9% out of the 300 respondents had adopted generative AI widely. And these respondents are from a wide range of industries, from financial to consumer packaged goods and retail to oil, gas, and energy, etc. So basically, 76% of these companies surveyed had worked with generative AI in only one or a few limited areas. And to break that down, 1/3 of the respondents have conducted at least one trial, but did not go further to permanently adopt any tools, or at least they tell us they did not go any further. And you know, just slightly over 1/3 of them, 37%, deployed generative AI in a specific area, but have yet to do so more generally across company-wide. So even in sectors that rely on IT, we should expect. We found that adoption has only started to spread. Just for example, again, back to the media and communications sector, only 20% of respondents said that they are adopting it company-wide, and also in the telecoms and technology sector, only 18% of them are reporting the same thing. So what we have also found is, as you know, and David had mentioned this earlier, the most common use case was automating repetitive tasks. And our expert interviewees, you know, say that generative AI deployments are basically tactical experimentations right now, rather than holistic transformations. And you know, one of them say that too many experts are looking at it as a way of automating or augmenting their workflows, rather than rethinking use case fundamentals or the desired outcomes that they really want. David.
Yeah, I think that's been our experience in Telstra as well. So AI itself is nothing new. We've been deploying AI in the form of machine learning for many years, and the benefit that that's been delivering the business has been accelerating in the last few years, primarily around robotic process automation and automating the booking of field services, for example, or chatbots in our customer services centres. So that has been happening for many years. In terms of the generative AI and kind of algorithms that are more kind of neuro-based, that's been newer. We've been very much agreeing with the kind of the sentiment from the report that 2003 was kind of learning in the shallow end, and we've been doing the same thing. So we've activated Copilot, the Microsoft AI, across a set number of users across the business, and been seeing how they've been using it to just do, relatively, I say trivial, but kind of, the cumulative impact of it's quite impactful in terms of summarizing documents that have been written, rearranging reports, making it more effective in terms of the more concise and more complete in terms of the communications around that. One small use case that I'm working on personally is for customer reporting. We spend a lot of time trying to come up with the right sorts of dashboards that tell customers the right metrics for their business. And you spend a lot of head scratching time trying to make that really really fit and really good for everybody. But what we're trying to explore is, can we put all of that information into a data lake and then have some sort of natural language interface so that customers can query the information and have the reports presented in the way that they want. For example, please show me what key application is driving the peak utilization of my traffic in India at this time of day. So I think they're the sort of low-level kind of tactical use cases that we've been looking at. But we've also been really building the foundation for how we can then scale up into 2024 and beyond. And, that's quite exciting.
Yeah, and I think the study suggests that people, although it's early days for 2024 and beyond, have fairly ambitious plans for AI. But there is, again, this caveat that there are IT, I don't call them deficiencies or potential bottlenecks. So do the majority of people know how they're going to implement AI, or are there a lot of sort of rude surprises in store when people go, oh, we're going to do AI, and then they suddenly go, oh, we haven't got, the network or the storage or the compute, whatever? Or do you think everyone does understand, the requirements to get where they need to be, if that's a fair question?
Well, I think there is, from my experience, I think that people have got a pretty good awareness. The companies that I've interacted with, they've got a pretty good awareness of the variables. But the challenge is, it's partly IT, as I mentioned earlier. It's partly the IT infrastructure and the time it takes to get in place the right infrastructure, figure out the right strategy, the contracting arrangements with the app providers or the storage providers, etc. But I think the thing that is more challenging and takes a bit more time is getting everybody on the same page as to how you're going to implement it and what the processes and procedures are going to be. That's the bit that most organizations are still working through. So we've we set up a kind of an executive role looking after data and AI, and a lot of their time has been spent on the data architecture and processes and the ethics around that to make sure that bias isn't built into the process, and that sort of foundation is now allowing us to push out use cases like a kind of a bespoke search engine for Telstra's own stuff. So a common thing is you might not know the right process to get an object from A to B, or you might not be able to communicate the right package for a particular customer. So we've kind of created use that natural language algorithm to build an Ask Telstra search engine specifically for our frontline employees to be able to type in a query to help customers or to help them to do their job more effectively. So I think that is kind of starting then in the shallow end, but as that gets rolled out at scale, then the kind of the IT related infrastructure parts will become more acute, because at some point you're going to find, wow, we've got a lot of data here. It's going to cost us a lot to store all of that. It's going to keep a lot for us to keep incrementing the network to be able to access that. So again, we have to have processes in place to figure out, what's our retirement plan for that data, what parts of that data can we trust. So that kind of the health and the governance around it is what's going to kind of soak up a lot of intellectual property over the next few months.
Okay, and what other interesting aspect, I think, of the study was that the suggestion or the finding that there are non-technology. We've obviously talked mainly about the technology itself, the IT infrastructure, but I think the study, I say, highlights that there's some non-technology factors which can also have a negative impact or potentially put AI projects at risk. So perhaps Kwee Chuan, you can talk us through that.
Sure. As you've mentioned, there are indeed non-IT factors that could undermine the successful or rapid use of generative AI companies. And among them, we found that risk is the top leading barrier to rapid or perceived barrier to rapid AI adoption, because 77% of respondents say their regulatory compliance and data privacy environment could be an obstacle. And listening to comments from our expert, one pointed out that regulators and litigators could also rein in businesses that might be overstepping existing rules with the technology. And at the same time, others have also pointed out that it's really, because it's such a new field, it's really still unclear whom to hold accountable for what. And some companies could have completely bypassed internal regulatory or compliance checkpoints and may not be aware of it. Now, in addition to risk, another factor that was non-IT factor that was identified was budgets. 56% list investment budgets as a potential obstacle for implementing generative AI. And among the other factors are the organizational culture, the competitive environment, as well as, of course, skills or the lack of IT skills, at the moment. And, we found that the IT skills needed for substantial AI projects are still in short supply. But among, our respondents, early adopters are more acutely aware of this shortage than those who haven't deployed the technology widely.
Okay, so I mean, if it's possible to summarize the conversation, maybe both of you can just give a bit of feedback. It seems as if everyone, well, the vast majority are embracing AI as an opportunity, not as a threat. But whether or not they're aware of it, there are potentially a few little bumps or roadblocks along the way. Is that a fair assessment, or is it a bit more nuanced than that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, just to sort of comment a little bit on the last question as well. I think one sort of softer area that non-technical area that came up in the survey too was around culture. So I think you've got to educate the employees and the staff members around how to use AI and how to generative AI and what it means, and how to almost educate it as it emerges. So, I think it's important to set up programs company-wide to start to educate staff in what it means, how to use it, when to show sort of healthy skepticism around certain areas. I think there's an awful lot of excitement around it. There's an awful lot of concern around it, and sometimes it's a little bit bipolar in a sense. So, as an example, we have a Club CISO is one of our sort of communities of interest that, as the name suggests, has got hundreds of CISOs from different companies around the world, and they're actually a very similar percentage, just over 60%. We're saying, they see generative AI as a high or very high threat to their organization from a security point of view. But at the same time, 80% of them were implementing generative AI as a way to protect their environments and defend their environment. So it's kind of, yes, there's risks and opportunities, and I think we're kind of, based on where we are in the hype cycle at the moment, I think gradually they'll start to sort of converge to a kind of a more realistic assessment of how it can be used. I think that journey will happen in the next couple of years as we start to roll out some of these use cases at scale.
Yeah, and Kwee Chuan, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. To add to that, basically the survey or the report, has found that our respondents are widely recognized that generative AI can be used as a competitive advantage, and companies appear likely to pursue an aggressive strategy. But the question this year, 2024, is how many of them are ready to deploy this technology. And we, just as a summary, we found that there are specific challenges that companies should be mindful of, and they are in IT infrastructure points that we've mentioned in this conversation: data, risk management, budgets, and as David had very clearly, rightfully pointed out, culture, skills, and competitive environment as well. So because without the careful consideration of these factors, our survey responses indicate that many of them could end up being exposed to disruption rather than becoming the disruptors they are hoping to be.
Actually, one other thing occurs in terms of the enthusiasm for AI. Is it exclusively because people can see all the great things it can do for them, or is there an element of defensiveness that people are thinking, well, if we don't embrace AI, then we'll get eaten up, destroyed, whatever, by people that do? Is there a sort of fear factor driving people, or is it more a positive, yes, this is great for us, or we have to do it because otherwise we might be in trouble?
I think it's two sides of the same coin. I think everyone sees the opportunity, but we all work in a competitive environment, and everyone sees the opportunity. So it's a little bit of a race to use it to gain some competitive advantage. So I think that's, as I said, two sides of the same coin.
Yeah, and from our side, definitely, agree with David. But at the same time, we do see optimism in terms of the number of users that this technology could benefit companies. So especially, in certain areas such as strategic analysis, product innovation, and customer service. So, our survey responses indicate that a lot of respondents are looking to use that technology in these areas in 2024.
Okay, I mean, it's been brilliant to chat to both of you, and some excellent insights into what's going on, because I know, as I say, you could sometimes just ignore it. Everyone's talking about it and you just assume what's going on, but what you've told us has been fascinating to understand a bit more of the reality. So both Kwee Chuan and David, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.